Today on Northside Custom RC, we're going to be converting a Redcat Racing 64 Impala Lowrider from a regular street car like this into a radical hopper like this. Let's get into it. All right, so what we got here basically is what I like to call a street hopper, a boulevard banger. It's keeping the original rear end geometry. So you don't have a crazy high lift back end. It's basically keeping the regular geometry in the back. And it's still a single pump in the front. It's gonna be a Jevry super pump in there to make it happen. And this is the type of car that everybody needs to have. They need to have something that could, you know, cruise the boulevard, three-wheel, but still has enough oomph to hop and bang that bumper like a champ. But then when you want to get to that next level in the hop game, this is when what you want to build is a radical hopper. Now in this conversion, all the parts that I use to convert it from a street hopper are found at the RC Hop Shop. He's got the full rear end conversion kit and he's got the full front end hop conversion kit and radical hopper setup so that, you know, you can hit them switches, get them inches, and not worry about bottoming out or smacking the bumper or stuff like that. So I'm gonna go over all the different things you need in order to make this conversion, give you some tips and tricks on how to install them, make sure everything's working right. So what is exactly a radical hopper? When you start hopping these RC and start getting into competitions, the easiest way to define a radical hopper is when the rear wheels are getting pushed back to the point they don't sit inside the wheel wells. As far as a radical hopper, more or less it's anything goes, and this is when you start seeing the rear wheels start getting pushed back, because pushing those wheels back is how you get more inches, and in order to win the competitions, the most inches wins. There's no real rules other than that. I believe it was stated that you can't get stuck, you can't fall backwards, and you can't double switch. So those are essentially the raw rules when it comes to the competition radical hoppers. Anything else pretty much goes. So in order to get that height, we start pushing the rear wheel back, and you'll notice that as you start playing with the geometry, how far you have the rear links extending, pushing the rear axle back, and the height you have the rear axle being pushed out with the shocks and the servo horns, you're going to notice you're going to be basically playing with how this car sits in the air and how many inches you can get. So as it comes with competitions, you know, it's going to be really on you. You know, how extreme you go with your axle, how high you go up with your servo horns and whatnot, and so it's going to really depend on your choices for the setup. But for the most part, this is the starting point. What I'm using here is the Hop Shop rear link setup. Alright, so in this video, there's going to be a lot that I'm talking about. So before we get too deep into it, I'm just going to give you an overview on all the things I'm going to touch. just so you're not looking for something and it doesn't show up, or you're expecting me to talk about something and I don't. So basically we're going to talk about the extended rear links, installation details and tuning details, installation of the dual front servo hop setup from the RC Hop Shop, also the clearance spacers that we're using for keeping the car from bottoming out. We're also going to talk about servos. We're going to talk about BECs and voltages. We're going to talk about battery packs. We're going to talk about yeah, everything really that's involved in building one of these radical hoppers. So with that, I do got to give much love to all the guys out there that have been supporting the channel, all the grassroots companies. These are not the big name companies like Traxxas or anything like that. These are grassroots companies, guys that are making parts for these RC that are, I mean, out of this world. We also got the RC Hop Shop, who did donate the kit for the installation over here. We've got to bring up Jeffries. Jeffries is definitely on point, has been literally helping me with this game. Just gone and done stuff to help Northside Custom RC keep doing its thing. Let's get into it. And we're comparing it with a stock geometry rear end. You'll notice the rods are a lot shorter than the extended links. So these links follow a much bigger circle than these small links right here. So it's going to keep the wheels further back longer and for more travel, versus these that once you start pushing these too far, they start to move underneath the chassis and further away from the bumper. So it basically creates the kickstand effect and you don't really get more height. I've got 1.75 millimeter shocks in the rear, or 1.75 inch. Well, these are the shocks from the Hop Shop. So they do give that extra lift, and as you'll notice with the extended links, the wheel is not just further up in this situation, but it's also further back. So you'll see right here. And that further back is what basically allows us to get the more height. The further back it is, obviously the taller it's going to be. So when it comes to how radical you want to be, you basically just keep on extending these links. You can just keep on adding extension after extension after extension until you get the wheels exactly where you want to be. And you basically do that with the length of the links and the length of the shocks and servo horns. So you position the wheels exactly where you want to be so that the car stands at the highest point that it can. All right, so what we basically did back here is we used the RC Hop Shop center link mounting kit, mounting piece right here. And what this does is it perfectly slots into, this is all one piece. It's hard, doesn't look like it because of how it is, but this is actually all one piece. And all the links connect directly to this piece right here. And
damn, D-Mark, this shit hard as a motherfucker.
That screws directly into this. There's already pre-done holes here that are for like the original body mount piece, or the body mount that you'll use with the dual servo kit. Either way, there's already pre-done drill holes there, so you don't need to do any tapping or nothing like that. The M3 screws will go right into that perfectly. And then underneath this bolt right here, it's hard to see, but there you can see it. There is actually a 2.5 millimeter screw. So this one here, there's no holes already there. So you go ahead and drill that out. I think I did a 1.8 millimeter hole with the drill, and then I used the screw itself just to tap it, and then screwed in nice and snug, and that holds on here absolutely solid. From there, the links screw directly into that. And if you don't use these extensions, you just put the the rod ends directly to there. This will actually keep the wheels inside the wheel well. But if you really want to get that height and you want to go radical, you need to start getting these extensions, putting them on and pushing the wheels back. So this is the first set of extensions. As I said, this is like the starting point for a comp hopper, like the starting point. So essentially when it comes to the rear links, that is pretty much it. I will suggest that when putting the links together, once you got everything lined up properly and set up so that it's going to be exactly how it is, go ahead and put some Loctite on the rod ends just to make sure that they stay perfectly locked in exactly how you want it. Anytime you're going to be putting a screw into aluminum, you're going to want to make sure you got Loctite in there so it doesn't wiggle around, it stays proper and safe. When you start really jacking up the rear and going for crazy height in the rear, you end up pushing the front down on a more steep angle. And what this does is it makes you bottom out and smack the bumper when you're trying to hop. So there's some other modifications that we do to the front end that I'm going to go over that help you be able to bounce on the front springs, giving you the clearance to not hit the bumper, not hit the chassis, not hit the subframe bottoming out. So it makes the hop a lot easier to get that nose up in the air. Now you're going to see on the Radical hop car, there is a lot more clearance for that bumper before it hits, and we got that back end fully jacked up. Not only is it going to be a lot harder to bottom out, but also the bumper smacking into the floor and stopping the hop and causing it to slow down and not get the ups that we want. So to make sure that we have the clearance for the hop, we're not bottoming out, we're not having any issues with the when the RC is coming down, smacking the bumper, hitting the underside, bottoming out. In between the subframe and the frame rails are these 8mm spacers. As you see in the regular car, it doesn't have them. We've got the frame rails here. Can't try to focus in there. It's a little dark for it to see. There we go. We got the frame rails and the subframe right against each other. In order to make this work, because it's going to foobar the steering, you also have to add the same size spacers onto the steering link. So what you see here is not just the spacers on the steering link, but also the RC Hop Shop adjustable steering link so that we can correct the toe and make sure that the toe is perfect when you got the car all dropped down. There's no toe out. If you have the steering link correction adjusted properly, and you also have the, try and see them here, the steering link spacers, hold on, right there. If you see on where the steering link screws into the steering knuckle, there's a silver spacer there. That with the toe correction link, when it's up, it actually stays pretty damn straight. We are running the full Hop Shop dual servo conversion kit with the front brace, and we're also using the RC Hop Shock hopping shocks. So I'm going to go over some of the details of the installation and what you need in order to make this setup really work at its best. And basically the kit consists of a mounting bracket to mount the servos to, with a brace that goes all the way around the servos, which the servos actually screw directly into. It also has the aluminum rockers and aluminum push rods. Alright, so with the Hop Shop dual servo setup, it does include the spacers here for the subframe. Everything is so nicely done, so let's go ahead and put those in. And when it comes to putting the servos together, you kind of want to put the servos into the mount and get it all done up nice and tight before you put it into the RC. So the first step is going to be, you know, getting the servos onto the mount, and then we'll get that into the RC as the next step. But yeah, everything looks real nice inside the kit. Can't wait to get this in and running. There we go, 50.37. And the entire hop kit. That is insane. It doesn't even make sense. How is that even possible? Now, when it comes to the installation for this, there are some key things that you're gonna wanna take note. Okay, so what I basically did on this side here was once I started screwing through, obviously because there's no hole that goes all the way through, you're gonna start pushing on the plastic. So what I did was I took a 3mm drill bit and I just drilled the opposite side so that it was easier for them to push through without like splitting the plastic of the frame rails apart or anything like that. It came out real nice. There we go. All right, so on the opposite side of the top side of the frame rails, what you want to do is you want to drill this so that these screws slide all the way through. Just like so, just like so. So I basically used the original screws, screwed them in there until it made a little dent on there. You can see the little widening of the chassis rail for the screw itself, and then just drilled through the top, cleaned it all out. And now these screws are basically going to attach into the mounting plate. So you don't want to have to fight through the frame rails and then go into the piece there. The threads are going to kind of fight each other. It's not going to be right. So you kind of want to have these go like this, nice and smooth. And then it's going to hold into the mounting plate there as these parts are threaded. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get that in there. All right, so save yourself a little bit of trouble. I actually didn't have the rocker arms, or the brace installed before I mounted it into the chassis to the servos. And then this plastic here was basically blocking me from screwing in these two screws here and here, which was a big pain in the butt. So I had to literally take the mount off in order to move this into a place where I can actually get access to those screws. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put the spacers back in. The subframe unscrewed from the frame rails. It's still connected by the steering link, so it's not gonna really just drop down. Just leave it like that, and we're gonna go ahead and put the spacers in there. All right, so another really good tip is that you're gonna wanna put this together as a unit with the servos before you put it into the RC, because the way these lower screws are mounting in, you'd have to have your screwdriver like going through there, so just be a real pain in the ass. And so on the brace that goes all the way around, one side is threaded and one side the screws will pass right through. So the one that's on the part that connects to the actual mount itself, you want to make sure that those are the pass-through screw holes on this mount here, so it's able to screw into the lower plate and it's all good. And the top part has to have the screws on it so that you can actually screw the servos to it. Now, whether you mount the servos with the gear up or the gear down, I'm told it does not matter. With that, this plate here is now going to be able to mount onto our screws down here that's already pre-drilled. So those screws just slide up and down. They're not screwed in there. So once I put this on and screw it in, it's going to use this to actually thread and hold it to the plate. All right, so now we have the plate installed and we have the spacers spacing out the subframe from the rails. So it's going to give us a lot more clearance so we're not bottoming out when we're doing the hop. All right, so with the subframe spacers, we've got to start talking about the rocker arms. Now the rocker arms and the shocks, when you're putting these in, there's some key things you need to take note of. These things need to move perfectly freely. So if you screw these screws in too tight, it's going to pinch the aluminum and basically grab onto the rocker or the push rod and grab onto the shock, and they're not going to be able to move freely enough to go up and down smoothly, so you're going to lose power on the hop. So what you need to do is you need to put a little bit of Loctite on the screws and screw them in until it tightens it up and it won't move, and then just back out until it frees up the actual shock or the push rod. And then with the Loctite on there, let that sit for a little bit. It'll harden up. You won't need to worry about these screws backing out, because you're going to be hitting these things with so much power and going up and down that if you don't have these things secured with that Loctite, the screws are going to back out. You're going to lose a shock, lose a push rod, lose a bushing, lose something you don't want to lose. So once we got the shocks and the push rods and everything moving perfectly freely, you got to make sure that everything moves perfectly freely. We have to talk about the servo horn. Now the servo horn with this setup is critical. It has to be a very low profile servo horn, and it has to be a 10 millimeter hole from the gear. This is to get the most power from the servos for the punch with the fast servos that we need to use for hopping. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about servos after, but for the moment, this is the setup that won't matter what servo you're using. They all have to be set up pretty much like this. You need to have the 10 millimeter servo horn, the lowest profile possible. The reason it needs to be such a low profile is so that the push rod is able to sit on a perch of 2 of these little bushings. You see these little bushings here that come with the hopper kit? We're going to be basically putting 2 of them front to front, and that's going to create a little, you know what I'm talking about, that's going to create a little perch for it to have a little bit of wiggle room. So it has to be extremely in line so that there's no angle at all going side to side like this, so that when you're pushing on the push rod, it's going right into the shocks and you're not losing any power, pushing in something that's locked up or too tight or whatnot. So it needs to be able to run smooth like so. And also, when it comes to attaching the push rod to the servo horn, you gotta use Loctite, because this will back out. I've gone so far as to use 2 screws. One's just a locking nut, so I can tighten down this one and then wrench this on there. It's got the Loctite, and then this is very, very, very much solid. Should be unscrewing when I'm banging them switches. Now, as far as what servo horns to use, the Jeffries servo horns actually work perfectly for this. You do need to use the first 10 millimeter hole and cut them down. So you see, this is what I started off with, and you could see the end result is much smaller. But because when we're going on the low side, the servos are going to be basically pointing at each other like this. So you need to make sure that there's enough space. They have to go towards each other as close as possible. So you need to, cut off as much as you can, but still leave enough meat that the screw is not going to be flimsy, because it's going to be putting a lot of power from the servos through that horn. So you do need to make sure that there's enough meat that it's still strong enough to hold together throughout all of that. Now, as far as how the servo horn is set up on the servos, you can actually have the servos installed with the gear on the top side like I have it, or on the bottom side. I'll try and show you a picture of what that looks like. And really, I don't think it makes the hugest difference. A lot of people do like it on the bottom side better than the top side, but I just found it a little bit easier for me to manipulate all this stuff with it on the top side, so I just left it like that. And as far as, you know, which side you prefer, you know, it's going to be a personal choice. To do it like this, it's on the top side, and to do it like a lot of others, and I'll show you in a picture, it's going to be the bottom side. But at the end of the day, it's the same principle. We're going to be using the tiny little servo horn, push the push rod, and get that hop motion going. Now for the shocks, what I'm using are the RC Hop Shop hop shocks. There are other options out there. I mean, if you do go into the Redcat Lowriders Facebook group, there are people out there that have shocks similar to this that they use for doing the hop. What you like better is really going to be up to you, but for this kit here, it's all RC Hop Shop. So I do got the RC Hop Shop shocks in there. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and take them out because everything is Loctited together, and I don't want to mess with something that's working right. So I'll show you a picture of what they look like off the website. And yeah, so that's basically it as far as the mechanical installation of the front end parts for the dual servo hop kit with the Radical Hopper 10mm spacers. Now keep in mind, this kit, you do not just need to build a Radical Hopper with this kit. This will work on a regular hop build without using the spacers underneath the chassis. This is just so that we can get the most ups out this kit. And so yeah, just keep that in mind. So if you want to just do a regular dual servo 64 without doing the Radical Hop stuff, you can still use a kit like this and it will be perfectly fine. Now, when it comes to any hop build, if you're gonna run the car with a drive shaft, you do need to do a Flip Chris drive shaft mod. There are some other types of mods that you can do to get around this, but the one that I like to use is the Flip Chris mod, so that's the one that I'm gonna suggest go ahead and using. Now, because we've moved the differential so much further away from the transmission, the regular drive shaft obviously is not going to be long enough. So a good option is to get a Monte Carlo drive shaft. And with this, depending on how far you want to push out your drive shaft or your rear axle, depending on how far you want to push that out, you can cut down the drive shaft to length. And this is a drive shaft that you can do the Chris Flip drive shaft mod on, and it will freewheel for the hop. So when it comes to hopping cars with the Redcat Lowriders, we need it to freewheel. So if you're gonna have a drive shaft in there, these drive shafts are gonna be hooked up to the motor and they're not gonna allow it to actually freewheel. So the Flip Chris drive shaft mod that there is a video on my page on how to do, allows the RC to freewheel so you can get the car to, you know, kick back and forth and hit those hops. So very important to get that done, and depending on how you have positioned your rear axle will depend on how long you need to cut the Monte Carlo drive shaft down. You can also get different lengths of the metal drive shafts, so you can actually get a longer one that's exactly like this, do the Flip Chris drive shaft mod on it, and then presto, you're good to go. A lot of folks now, when they get to this point in the build, they got 2 decent servos in there. They're hitting that switch. They got the extended rear links. They got the dual servo front setup. Everything is set up correctly, but they're hitting that switch and it really doesn't feel like it's hopping much better than it did when it's stock. That's because the situation that the RC is trying to hop in, the hop environment, is a lot harder for it to get those ups. So at this point, what people are doing is we're running 3S battery packs and we're using a BEC to turn that voltage up. Now, how high you turn the voltage up is going to depend on you, because what we're doing is breaking the manufacturer specs. We're going outside the specs, throwing away any warranties, anything like that. Once you turn the voltage up, that's when these things are going to really start to hit in that harder environment. Another factor with that is going to be the weight balance. So depending on how far you have your wheels pushed back will vary how much weight you need to take in and out of the back end, so that you don't end up with a kickstand. So when the wheels are further forward, it doesn't take a lot of weight to cause the kickstand. The further back the wheels are, the more weight you can actually run before it kickstands. And that weight is gonna help you get it up. But you wanna always, it's a balance. So adding weight, pushing the wheels back, you're always adjusting how much weight is back there, so that when your RC gets to the top with the body on, obviously, it's not getting stuck. One of the rules is if you get stuck, you lose. So you gotta make sure that when you're sitting like this, there's not enough weight with the body on to keep the nose in the air like this. If the body's on, the nose should be coming back down. So, keeping that in mind, the further back you push these wheels, if you have these wheels like all the way back here, you can run a lot more weight in the trunk without a kickstand, because it's gonna be sitting up like this and so forth. And literally, the further back you push those wheels, the further back that nose is gonna go up. So if you want to do that real skyscraper stuff, you see where that wheel's gotta be. And like we were talking about before, we don't want to bottom out. So as you notice, the nose, when it comes down, we got those spacers in there. It's not gonna be hitting the bottom. And this is with the front end flattened out. So as you'll see, no bottoming out. That's what you want. You want to have it come down like that, so that every switch head is not actually getting interference by the chassis smacking into the ground, the front bumper smacking into bounce, stuff like that. Next, I'm going to talk about servos. What servos to use. Now, in this kit right here, I only had one super pump available, but Jeffries is sending another super pump. It's already on its way. So this one is going to be set up with dual Jeffries super pumps, because they are the baddest hop servo out there. So as far as you know, which servo is going to hop the best, the Jeffries are going to hop the best. Can you hop with other servos? Absolutely. The 300s are good. Also, I mean, any 300 clone is going to basically hit the same as the 300. So a 300 clone, black, gold, scribed with, you know, different words on it, don't matter. Those are all going to basically hit the same. The Jeffries super pump is a little bit of a different servo. Jeffries worked with the manufacturer to make sure they had the best motor, the best gearing, and everything to really tailor the servo to a hop servo. So you're gonna want to get a couple Jeffries if you want to get the most powerful hop setup that you can get. And of course, powering those two Jeffries servos, not those two, but the ones that are going to be in there, you do need to go for the serious voltage. We need a 3S LiPo pack in this kit. You are not going to be able to really hit as hard with a 2S pack. That's going to be maxed out like 8.4 volts. So that's the max that a 2S can hit. And when it comes to competition hopping and running a radical hopper, you're going to need to turn the voltage up if you want to compete. Other guys that are out there, they got voltage that's way higher than 8.4 volts. And that's the way to get the most power into the hop. So to do this, you basically need a 3S battery, and Jeffries has a BEC that's tailored to working on a hop setup. It has 2 leads where you can take the power from the BEC directly into the hop servos, and then with that you can turn the voltage up. And how high you go with the voltage is going to depend on you. But when it comes to these radical hoppers, the reality is we're running high voltage on them. We're blowing past any factory warranties or anything like that. We're going outside the recommended specs, because when it comes to getting the most power, you got to do what you got to do and pay the cost to be the boss. With that, you're going to need to find yourself a 3S battery pack. And there's a lot of 3S battery packs out there. Essentially what you're going to be looking for is a standard size pack that's going to fit in the battery tray, or a size pack that's going to fit anywhere in the chassis that you want. If you think you can put it someplace better and help you out with your hop more, it all depends on your own build. But essentially the general rule of thumb is to get a standard size battery pack 3S 1060 connector, XT60 connector. Now when looking for the battery pack, it's going to be a standard pack with at least 100C. This one here is 135C. You don't want any of those what do you call them, the crawler packs that are made for trailing and stuff like that. They're like 3S 50C. They're not designed for, you know, hard hitting high amp stuff. So what you want to get is a battery pack that's got at least 100C. 100C and up is really the target for a hot build. So me, I'm with SMC. I got the DV Extreme Power 3S battery pack that's got 135C. You know, voltage, weight balance, and where you got your rear wheels positioned. These are the things that people are playing with in order to make their car different and win the competition, and to go more or less extreme on their build. So how far you take it from this point is really going to depend on where you want to go with your RC, and how badly you want to win those competitions, and also who's the competition in your area. If you're in California, I feel bad for you. There's a lot of hard ass competition out in California. But if you're in Colorado, you know, you might be able to win with just this setup alone. I don't know, but you know, Colorado boys, post up your RCs and tell me if that would be the case. All right, so that's gonna be it for this video. Do want to thank everybody for watching. Gotta thank again to Jeffries and RC Hop Shop for helping out with the builds and keeping the channel going. Do gotta thank everybody for sticking it out this long. It's been a long one, and I'll catch you in the next one.